Hey guys, this one is completely different to my regular video, right? So this is kind of tagged now in kind of education, right? And a part of what I wanted to discuss was about these things called prop firms, right? So for some of you guys who are potentially crypto traders only and so on, you might not have heard of prop firms, right? This tends to be more, although you can trade crypto in, a lot of them these days, a lot of these prop firms stem from kind of forex type heritage. So, okay, and trade that providing you pass a sequence of criteria, right? So, majority of prop firms, and I've kind of compiled a little list, right? So, majority of prop firms work on the premise that you have the first stage challenge, which is often between 8 and 10%, right? And this will vary, depending on the prop firm, what country you're in, what country the prop firm's located at. So a couple of different factors, right? Now, the second challenge tends to be, in general, a 5% kind of rule, right? So what it means is if we break it down kind of month by month or stage by stage, often a stage becomes a month. And ultimately, stage one, it means you are required to make an 8 to a 10% gain, right? There's other laws that usually come in and other rules that, again, depending on the prop firm, will be things like a limited daily drawdown, right? So you can't just go out there and open, 15 trades on the premise that you end up with a 10% gain. You actually have other things like a max drawdown rule. So again, majority of these prop firms seem to be around 10%. Again, sometimes 8%, but 10% seems to be the rule of thumb, right? So what it means is if you've got $100,000 account that you are challenging for and you're kind of aiming towards, basically means that you can't lose more than $10,000 within that month, right? And this also applies to the drawdown, right? So if you've got trades open, in essence, you can't go over that threshold, right? So in a day, for example, if you've got $100,000 account and the threshold is 5%, then in essence, you cannot lose more than 5,000 in a day without losing your initial deposit, right? Because you're actually paying towards the challenge. So on that particular topic, right, what I've looked at, what I've tried to do for this video now, I'll do other videos in the sequence if you like it. So please feel free to ask questions and anything else, right? And if you want to know more about what they are, how they work, etc., there's plenty of other information out in the public domain. But this is just something I wanted to share in terms of what we've been doing recently with some of our other students. Okay, so in essence, the way that I see this and the reason that I've titled this, right, in terms of your route to $1 million, is to a lot of people $1 million is kind of far fetched. It's out of their grasp. It's out of their domain, and therefore it's unattainable. Okay. Now, leveraging these prop firms, using these prop firms, the way that I've kind of put this list together is the general idea is to take a minimal investment, which is $100 to $150 worth of risk, and use that to pass a first phase, right? A first challenge, a first part. Now, what I've also done, I've just gone into Google and I've just typed in list of prop firms 2023, right? So this is a kind of search criteria. You can obviously put USA, you could put UK or other things, best forex firms, type in, crypto, for example, and you get a list. And obviously I'm not going to click on any of these lists, right? In terms of, just I don't want to kind of point anything towards one direction or another. I just want to go based on this is in general, right? This is a very generic video. There's no, like I said, affiliate. There's no partner. There's no nothing in terms of this. It's just the general idea and wrapping the concept around it. Okay. So what you then do is you start off, right? So I've taken FTMO as an example, right? This is quite a big name, especially in the UK. This is something that I know a lot of the guys that I've worked with have actually gone and used and gone through. So, like I said, right, step one, you have this challenge. Step two is the verification. So, in essence, here's your 10%, your 5%. And then ultimately, you become a funded trader. All right. So, just to give you an idea, and the reason that I wanted to use FTMO above all the other platforms for this is that they've got a pretty good dynamic in terms of showing you the price basis, right? So this is an example only rather than a a plug to these guys. Ultimately, right, if you start off with a $10,000 challenge, right, you can scroll down. It'll give you the list, the rules, the criteria, right? So you currently have a minimum trading days of 4 days, maximum daily loss of 500, right? Followed by a maximum loss of 1,000, right? So this is the 5%, 10%, and a profit target of 10% to actually go and reach, right? Then ultimately from there, what you have is the second part of this is obviously getting through the first stage, right? Now, another thing that I find quite interesting for a lot of these firms is it tends to be that if you pass the first phase in terms of time allocation, but don't actually meet the 10% criteria, you are entitled to start the challenge again for free, right? So the fee on this one is 155 euros, right? So again, what I've done is I've put that in terms of, it's 100 to $150 realistically. You might pay a little bit more, you might pay a little bit less depending on the firm, right? So what I want to do then is come into how this looks in terms of the charts, right? So, like I said, this is what I would suggest you do: is you go look at the prop firms, right? Do your own research in terms of jurisdiction, kind of good and bad kind of trust pilot reports, anything that you see kind of out in the public domain. Don't just jump in for one that you see as the cheapest option, right? It's always the same as picking a broker, looking at your stock exchange, and so on. The general idea is to do your own due diligence on that and find something that suits, one, your own style and strategy, and two, that suits obviously everything from where you live through to how you get paid, right? So first things first, right? In terms of, before I come in and look at, charts and ideas, and I think what I'll do is probably in the next video or another video, I'll probably do a little bit of this in terms of how to potentially pass some of these types of challenges, right? In terms of taking trades, what types of trades you're looking for. And I'll give that in a completely separate video, right? So if obviously, you want to see that, then again, let me know in the comments, and I'll make sure in the next couple of days I'll stick together a video, just giving you some ideas, right? So next thing, what I want to do is let's cover some of these, and what I'll do is I'll put some space in between this, right? So the general idea is after you've passed your 5%, right? So this is you've passed your 10%, you've passed your 5%, you've now become a funded trader. You've paid out $100 or $150. You've got a fund size of $10,000, right? What tends to happen is the prop firm that you go with will take a fee or a commission, right? And again, that tends to be between 10 and 15%. Okay. Then what I would suggest is instead of rushing out and aiming for this to do this overnight, is treat this as a business, right? Treat this as kind of steady growth, kind of income growth, and over a longer period. And it'll just take away a lot of the stress and strain in terms of trying to have to pass something like this, right? So what I would suggest is start with realistic targets, right? So in that kind of second month, third month, depending on how quick you kind of gain your actual funding, what I'd be aiming towards 2 to 4%, right? So I'm going to go on the assumption that we've aimed for a $10,000 challenge. We're looking at 2 to 4%, right? Let's go on the higher end, the 4%, which equals 1% a week, right? 1% a week, it's pretty basic in terms of the numbers, right? It's only realistically taking, either a very small trade or a handful of trades within that trading week, right? So again, keeping the options really open. You don't want to be pushing for, 10% every week or 30% every week. Very plausible, very possible, but a lot of strain and stress for the sake of it, right? So what I'd suggest is 2 to 4%, right? Now, if you look at something like this, the idea would be within the third to fourth month, right? So although I've put, month 2, 3, 4, this was just me, drafting something up just in terms of topics to discuss during this video. What I'd suggest is keep the first month, right, and kind of, bank the money, right? So if you're making 2%, you're making 4%, almost forget about it. Go treat yourself. One of the best things in terms of advice I had 20 odd years ago, right, was someone that I'd gone to. It wasn't even a course that I'd taken, but somebody that I regarded as kind of an expert in the forex field. He'd actually said on stage, look, when you make your first, bit of money, you make your first real, big trade, right? And that could be anything from, you've made £500 and you're not used to making that kind of money in trading. go do something that you wouldn't do, right? Go treat yourself or your better half to a meal, go buy an expensive bottle of champagne, go do something that kind of gives you the urge, that gives you the excitement, right? Gives you that kind of taste of what is to come, right? Now, I'm going to stick to that and say that's probably one of the best bits of advice I've had in my trading career, right? From there, the next thing, right, is the month following, right? Or it doesn't have to be. This could be 2, 3, 4 months down the line, right? The month following, what you want to do is you want to be getting your mindset to think like this is almost a free bet, right? You've had some kind of income, but you're not really dependent on it, right? You've kept your day job, you're trading your own account still, whatever it might be, right? That this becomes almost a business in its own kind of narrative, right? So at this particular point, the way that I would look at this is within the next couple of months, right? Look at the 2 to 4% kind of rule, right? Keep it as a rule of thumb. Now, obviously, you might get some months where you do 1%, you get other months you do 5%, right? But just this is being generic. This is just trying to give you guys a bit of a flavor, right? Now, what I'm going to look at is if we assume the next part of the business and the business plan is to obtain a $50,000 account, right? Now, you've had 1 month or 2 months, 3 months or more of making 2 to 4%, right? Technically, an account of 50,000 ranges between $300 and $350 to actually go and purchase a fund, something like this, right? So I'm going to come back to this in terms of the matrix, right? I'm going to look at a $50,000 account. Obviously, you could step into 25, right? This is just, again, just to give you an idea, right? I'm going to scroll down, similar rules as you see, 4 days minimum, 2,500, which basically equals the 10%, 5%, right? So sorry, this is a 25 grand account. Oh no, 50 grand account. So at this particular point, right, you can't lose more than 5%. So that is the same rule, right? I've put that backwards, sorry. You ultimately can't lose more than 5 grand, 10% on the full month or the full period. Your profit target is 10%, right? And the refundable fee is 345. Now, the refundable fee, I don't know if all prop firms do this, right? But ultimately, what it means is if you pass the challenge, you get this part, this part back in terms of your fee as well, right? So another little bonus. Now, in the grand scheme of things, right, I've just covered that 345, right? So $350, I guess in terms of a number, right? So the next thing is what you want to be doing from there is looking at, I say month 7, right? This is just kind of an example. You want to be looking at taking that account from your first 10,000 to maybe 2 accounts, right? Now, you could obviously do this. Now, I'm assuming that you fail, right? And you fail a couple of these things. You've spent $350 4 times, right? However, out of the 4, you fail 2 and pass 2, right? Now, the general idea is that you've got an account size now of $110,000, right? This is just on the assumption, like I said, you could have been at 75, you might be at 160 at this point, right? The general idea is we take the 4% monthly profit. The prop firm receives their fees, an average of 10 to 15%, right? So let's assume a 10% fee for now, for the example. You've earned 4,400 based on your $110,000 account, minus the 400 fees, which obviously gives you in your pocket a $4,000 figure. Right. So this is kind of step 1, stage 1. This is why I've kind of, blanked this off step 1, right? So stage 1, even if this takes you a year, right? It's not a bad position to be in if you're a part-time trader right now, if you're not, used to this kind of number, if you're looking for how you can leverage trading in general, right? This is definitely a good route to at least consider, right? Look into, go do your own due diligence, right? The next thing is obviously in terms of money banked, right? So what I would regard as stage 2 is you've banked a couple of months, right? This could be 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months. It doesn't really matter the time frame, right? But the point being is what you now have is your stress is starting to disappear, right? You're no longer trading for a living. You're trading to increase that capital, right? This particular point, you can now start aiming at bigger account sizes, right? Majority of these prop firms have $200,000 accounts plus, right? Some of them will allow you to manage a couple of million at a time, right? So let's aim for $200,000 account, right? Similar rules, 4 days, max loss daily, 10, right? Which is ultimately 5% of 200,000. Maximum loss overall, 20,000. And the profit target is 20,000. However, the fee now becomes just over €1,000. It's €1,080 or $1,100 more or less, right? So at this particular point, right, I've calculated for 1,000 to 1,500, right? You've already spent a little bit of money to get to this point, but you've already made some money on the assumption that you've been covering your 2 to 4%, right? So from this particular point, the next stage and the next step is we look at a 2 attempts, cost of $3,000, and you maybe pass one. That account now has jumped from your 110 to 310, right? Now, at this particular point, let's make it even easier on yourself, right? Let's give you something to really think about. Instead of aiming for 4%, why not aim for 2%, right? And what I've done now is, on the back of this, I've reduced these numbers intentionally, right, to give you something to think about, right, to give you kind of food for thought. If we reduce this to 2%, right, which equals 0.5% a week, right? Now, if you can't do 0.5% a week, right, realistically, you're going to, struggle to pass these types of challenges in the first instance. But secondly, right, it doesn't have to be a consistent 0.5% a week. You could do 1% 1 week and take 2 weeks off, right? I'm just assuming and giving some examples, right? Just to kind of give you an idea in terms of these being realistic numbers, very achievable, very plausible, right? And I'm not going out there and kind of promising the moon and, this is how you take this from this and you're earning £1,000,000 a day. None of that bullshit, right? The reality is this is how you can make this sustainable for the long run, right? So if we look at 0.5% a week, 2% a month, right? We are now looking at, with a $300,000 account, right? We are looking somewhere in the region of $6,000, right? With the fees, 5,500, right? Let me just double check this. I've got the calculator out ready, right? We have 310,000, 1, 2, 3, right? We're going to times that by 2%, and we're going to put that out to 6,200, right? So just giving you the math, giving you how this works, right? Then what we want is we want to take away 10% for the fees. 10% equals $620 to the broker / prop firm, would leave you with 5,580 in your pocket, right? So even if you play with these numbers and you're not at 300,000, you just reduce the number. If you're more than 300 and maybe your prop firm is taking 15%, not 10, right? You just get the general idea in terms of what I'm talking about, right? Now, let's take this to the next stage, right? This is the kind of the third stage. This is kind of, in terms of a business plan, this is your kind of scale up period, right? So you've gone through your startup phase, you've gone through that kind of bridge financing yourself. You're ultimately at the stage where you're looking to accelerate your account growth more than pocket cash right now for your daily use, right? Which kind of sounds absurd when trading is to profit. The idea of obtaining a larger account size means that you can trade less if you choose to, right? With less of the stresses and the strains, and ultimately realistic target goals that are beyond sustainable, okay? So stage 3, in essence, is we repeat stage 2. We increase the capacity, the fund size, right? In a similar fashion, you're using profits that you've made from the previous months to acquire, $1,000, $1,500 at a time for a $200,000 account, right? Now, you could step this. I think people like FTMO, they also do a smaller kind of middle of the range, which is $100,000. So obviously you can jump from 50 to 100 to nothing stopping you going backwards and taking 25,000 at a time, right? The general idea is obviously the fees change as half the price. The targets are the same, 5 and 10%, or 10 and 5%, minus obviously the loss criteria, 5% and 10%. Okay. So at this particular point, what we then want to look at is, again, let's just look at $200,000 challenge, right? Same criteria. So it's going to be within a 2 months or a 3 month kind of period, right? Then the general idea is obviously within that period of time, you're looking to increase. Now, if obviously some of these are minimum 4 days, you could pass that challenge within 4 days and ultimately be on to the second stage within 4 days, which means within 10 days, realistically, you could be already funded, right? Now, obviously, this changes and varies, and I'm going to keep saying this, right, in terms of just the disclaimer. This will vary depending on the prop firm. It'll depend on their own rules and their own criteria, right? In terms of the assumption, then, right, is we step up 300, we add another 200 to the equation within the first month, 2 months, 3 months, right? So we come in on now near a year. We're trading with potentially 500,000, and we're aiming at realistic profit targets at 2%. 2% profit target, $10,200 per month, minus the fees, right? What I'll do is I'm going to round this down, take away the 10,000 just for making the math simple, right? What we're going to say now is the next time we add another $100,000 to that account, right, would equal $12,000 per month at 2%, right? You have a bad month, 1%, it's 6 grand, right? You have a good month, it's 3%, it's 18,000, right? You can kind of see how these will allow you to leverage this further and further and further, right? I've done the math basically around 600, 700, 800, 900, right? Which equals obviously just repeat the second steps, right? Now, what I'd recommend is you take a screenshot of this, you copy this, right? This is kind of the blueprint and play with it, right? This isn't mine. This isn't something that I say you have to do. It's just something that I personally suggest, right? This is something that you can easily copy, paste, repeat, copy, paste, repeat, copy, paste, repeat, all right? So this particular point, the idea is that these figures that I've just put in are all before your fees, right? Add your 10, 15% fees to that, or take your 10, 15% fees off that. And then in essence, it'll give you an idea of what, like I said, is sustainable, right? Relatively straightforward. And it'll give you the idea in terms of what to do. So what I'll do is I'm going to jump back to almost the start, right? And the general idea is first things first, go do your own diligence on prop firms. You can type in list of prop firms 2023, list of prop firms for crypto, for example, right? You come up with a completely different list, right? Now, ultimately, find what suits your style, your requirements, right? And that's obviously the big thing. And what I do say to people in terms of any time you're picking an exchange or a broker or any kind of money manager per se, is check in terms of the jurisdictions work for the country that you're domiciled in, right? Or the way that you've structured yourself or business, whatever you do personally. That's an individual thing rather than something that anyone can really give advice on in a generic term. All right. Then obviously once you've picked that, you can start looking at your level size. Now, I say $10,000 as a start, right? Only in terms of the psychology. If you're already, you got a good day job, you might want to throw, straight into $1,000 rule. You could skip almost step one immediately if you wanted to do that. But the reason that I'm saying start off on the small side is that this covers a broader range of people that are probably watching this video, watching this stream, and ultimately this gives a better start in terms of taking away that stress, right? If you're using the initial capital as your only risk, it can trigger your mindset to think of the trades in a different way, right? So that's the only reason that I've kind of highlighted this kind of step one, stage one, right? Now, at this particular point, right, you can kind of see the logic, you can see the sense. In the next video, I'm going to cover a couple of different kind of strategies slash tactics and techniques. I'm going to see if we got any questions. But before I do that, obviously, we've also got our own prop firm kind of channel. And obviously, we talk about, how to get through this. We got a group of doing this, kind of putting people together and what they're actually looking for. We've got guys that are currently passing challenges and so on with us. And the general idea is, look, everybody's there out there to help. And that's kind of the point, right? So I'm going to finish off with that. I'm going to just check to see if there's any questions, any kind of thoughts. And yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave it like that. and then I'm going to see, like I said, in terms of the questions, and then see what's there. If not, obviously enjoy the week, guys. Have a good one. Um, yeah, it's kind of not really relevant for this conversation, but in essence, it's just a different way. I mean, sometimes when I say to people about, you know, the analysis that you do, I personally like DXY. I like DXY not only for forex, but I like DXY because Bitcoin is ultimately traded against the dollar. Although you can buy it through pounds and yen and euro and so on, the kind of the real base, I guess, behind that is dollar. So DXY is for me a good indication of what, Bitcoin is likely to do, what oil is likely to do, and so on, so on. So as you'd expect, as one gains strength, one will have a bit of weakness, and vice versa. So in terms of seeing things like USDT and BTC dominance, it's just another way of doing the same thing. Some people assume that there's an edge, there's something that they can grab, or kind of out of that. A lot of the dominance is to do with alts, and if Bitcoin is doing one thing, alts will ultimately do something else in a kind of a lagging sequence, and that's really it. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's the same thing with a different logo in essence, right? Anything else? Yeah, the taxman share in terms of that's obviously pretty expected. So you can cut that in half in terms of the numbers that I've covered. Yeah, unexpected beginning. It was just something different. Like I said, we've had a few of these conversations in our channel, and I think prop firms obviously was something that I was surprised to how little in terms of people actually know about them. It's not something that you have to do. It's not something that you need to do. It's just obviously I wanted to share this video on TradingView. I don't think I've seen a prop firm type video on TradingView, so I really wanted to put that out there, for that, and just share a little bit of knowledge and experience in the fact that they are available. All right. So if that's it, like I said, I'm going to finish, and I'll see you on the next stream, which will probably be back to covering Bitcoin or Forex. All right. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck with your trading. Cheers.